Hello, everybody. Thank you very much for joining all of us at the Deal Street Asia Indonesian Summit. And my name is Hien. I'm one of the partners at Open Space Ventures. And me and our guests, we've all been tasked today by the Deal Street Asia team to talk about a very important issue that's really gaining significant traction within the startup community. And that is the mental health of startup founders, as well as startup health in the actual ecosystem itself. I'm joined today by three really exciting friends and people that I respect tremendously in no order of importance. So we'll start with Geeta. Geeta runs her own startup. Of course, Kylie needs no introduction, 500 Startups, one of the founding partners. And last but not least, Theodoric Chu, who runs his own startup, Intellect. And I'm sure these folks can also, as we discuss, give a quick introduction about who they are and what they do. So to start it off with, I think one of my perspective, I used to be a founder as an entrepreneur. I'm now a venture capitalist. I've done this for 10 years. So I've done entrepreneurship in some shape or form for almost 2 decades. And I've always been fascinated by the fact that entrepreneurs are edgy people, and so the working hypothesis I want to put to everybody here is that are entrepreneurs actually people who are touched by fire? That is a term that was given by a researcher, Michael Friedman at the University of San Francisco, and that was the required reading before we did this session. Touched by fire, which is it the unique nature of entrepreneurs' minds that make them great entrepreneurs, but make them also very susceptible to mental health issues. So to kick it off, Kylie, in your experience with so many founders, do you see that this is true? Is it a gut feel that what gets you excited is also what is the thing that really, causes all these crazy things that happen in the startup world? Kylie, kick it off.
Yeah, no, thank you so much, Hien. I think like mental wellness and that whole concept, a few ways to think about it. For us at 500 Startups, last year rebranded to 500 Global. We've invested in about 77 countries and 2,700 startups. Now, when we play with law of large numbers, we get to see a few interesting patterns. Not proud of this at all. We had 2 founder suicides in the portfolio over the past 11 years, right? And the first time I encountered one of it wasn't in my portfolio. The founder had a successful Series C. So it wasn't even like a founder that was, not doing well, right? A successful Series C, it was ahead of its time. Wife didn't even know about it, right? So he swallowed the bullet. That moved me very personally. So in around 2017, I kind of waged war, right, against founder suicide. And I thought to create solutions which are more scalable. So I just want to share a bit of numbers, right, to your point here. And is it true that the startup entrepreneurial journey is one that attracts folks who are imbalanced, or is it one that attracts folks who become imbalanced as a result of the nature of the extreme sport?
That's a good point.
It could be a bit of both, right? But in our quest to actually try to solve this in a scalable manner, we found a researcher at Yale, as well as another gentleman who's an entrepreneur turned life coach. They paired up to create a platform at the time called Good Startups, which is now been called abroad.io. So we've worked with them across 4 years. We had from the Southeast Asia portfolio, 88 founders go through a series of surveys. They had some virtual workshops, and we had some physical immersions, right? And Grab was actually a very strong partner for us, a portfolio company, but a very strong partner for us as they provided a lot of space. Now, here's what we found. We found that some of our founders, they don't exhibit per se something as extreme as suicide, because that's kind of at the end of the line, right? But insomnia was pretty common when they have anxiety. And we had one of our founders go through some of those programs and said 3 months of not being able to sleep gone, right? After being able to deal with their own anxieties. We see that actually personal relationships with their partners and loved ones, big issue. Big issue. And then so we had one of our founding teams, a husband and wife couple, they were actually filing for a divorce. But after going through programs that helped them understand anxiety, they actually tore up the divorce papers, and that couple's startup is doing much, much, much better right now. And they have a child together. It's a very beautiful thing.
So Kylie, this is in your practice an actual real life issue that you guys actively track. I want you to hold that thought, because that's a great segue. Maybe we go to Theodoric, because he has a different perspective, right? Theodoric, introduce what you're doing as a
Yeah.
company? And, in some ways, are you providing companies the capabilities to do this? Because not everybody has the resources of 500 Global.
Yeah, and it's a great point. And just to give a bit of context, so at Intellect, we are a mental health benefits company, and we work with companies small to large scale to basically support the workforce in tackling more proactive mental wellbeing support. So rightly to your point here, mental health, mental wellness, or beat coaching, it's something that has been quite hard to reach for a lot of folks unless you are either actively identifying as you're in distress or you have that capacity to actually invest in seeing a coach or therapist in itself. So our starting point is how do we make mental well-being a lot more relatable, a lot more accessible to more people, right? So not just only to the folks that have access to it, but to the general population in the company as well. So that's kind of how we got started. And when we did a bit of a survey for ourselves across our population, what we found was that we condensed over 2,000 respondents in this little pool here. Most people struggle, but the tripping point is that most people do not know how to actually acknowledge or seek support in Asia. So it's kind of how the pain point of how do we solve for that problem statement, which got us started in this space as well.
And so you say they don't even have access. Maybe just quickly give us a sense.
Sure.
Why is it just unwillingness on the part of the individual?
Yeah. So when we look at this space, we look at it as three broad markets, and largely in the Asian perspective as well, right? So one big issue, and the biggest one typically, is the fear of judgment, right? People not being able to kind of speak up, to share that this is an issue that I face myself, and I think you may share as well her own experiences. Founders as well, where we are in a space like this, it's good to actually keep sharing your narrative of this point that it's okay to not be okay. That's the first thing. The second key thing is that mental health support tends to be quite expensive, right? For most people, seeing a therapist, seeing a coach, it's quite costly. And the third thing is that people just aren't as aware or have that literacy on mental health education, what it means to them. They have this preconceived notion that it's clinical and not relatable to their daily lives as well.
Yeah, so it's like you only seek help when you really need it.
Exactly.
And it should be more like gym training or just going to a HIIT class because you just want to get fitter. Geeta, you give us your perspective, please. You're part of the entrepreneurial community. You're a founder, just like all the rest of us. How have you found this journey? And tell us what you're doing right now.
Sure. I've been a serial entrepreneur now. I've built 5 companies in the last 12 years. So I've been in the ecosystem for a bit, and I wouldn't necessarily know what to say about everyone because I can only see what I see, right? But right now, for example, from my own personal perspective, I'm an autistic founder. I'm openly autistic, and that is a mental health and neurological condition where I physically just process information and express it differently than a lot of people. And part of the reason why I went into entrepreneurship is because I physically can barely fit into office politics of any kind. I think even the places where I did the best are just places where I see people the least, simply because I find it really hard to understand people's intrinsic motivations and things like that, reading people's faces and all of those things, like high context cultures, basically. But of course, as I got into entrepreneurship myself, I will say that Kylie came up with a really good question, which is it something that is within us or is it because of the environment? And in my studies as a master candidate in psychology and neuroscience, what we learn a lot about mental health conditions is that it's a combination of both how you were born, like genetically, how were you built, and then the environment itself, and also timing. So it's a confluence of many things. And I think from that, we can probably have a more holistic conversation about it.
Yeah, I like the idea of confluence, in the sense that there is a propensity towards a certain, level of mental perspectives, and then this whole thing about starting a company is just like driving a car at 200 kilometers an hour. It's very different if you drive the car at 80 kilometers an hour.
Hian, can I jump on a thing that Geeta said, which is I think a really powerful term, a neurological condition, right?
Yes.
So I feel like, because there's one thing about this whole journey and the semantics behind it about mental wellness. Like it's almost as though like this is plane of like mental processing, which yes, is very valuable and we should recognize that. But we also can recognize that a lot of what we experience and emotions that we experience has a biological and a physical dimension as well. So I'll give you a quick story, right, to exemplify this. One of my founders going through a lot. He realized his quick fix was he just had to drink more water. Like he realized that going through a lot of Zoom calls during the pandemic, he didn't have enough water beside him and he didn't go for enough breaks to get water. So his water intake over the few months just became less and less. So he's like, you know what? I'm just feeling dehydrated all the time. So I'm grumpy, I'm stressed out. So he's got a huge jug of water and just drinking a ton of water all the time. He's like, hey, my life is great again, right? So I just want to, and some folks say lack of vitamin B, so there's a lot of biological, and I don't want to again diminish like the importance of this topic, but I just wanted to add that having that physical dimension and having that neurological understanding it's brain health. Brain health is a very powerful word. It feels like it's more within our control. We've got levers that can actually move the cells and synapses in our brain.
But that my response to that is that when you label it more like brain health as opposed to a mental health issue, think of how great that gets reframed. Theodoric, how do you work to convince people to come onto your app? Really, if people don't come onto your app,
exactly.
That's startup.
That's a big part of what our job is, right? So twofold to our mission, right? So Intellect, we've grown and scaled quite a good amount. Today itself, we serve over 3 million users on the platform. But one of the key things that we started from day one was how do we make mental health a lot more relatable? So one fold is scaling access to mental health support. The other aspect of it was how to make it more relatable, basically, right? So at what we do as well, just building off Kylie's point. So this is actually, so I work with a lot of psychologists in our company and in the space as well. And one of the key things they bring out often is that there is a three-part towards this triangle of the cognition, CBT, right? So one aspect of it is towards your cognition, how you think. One aspect is how you feel, your emotions, and then one aspect is what you do as well. So oftentimes when you work with therapists and psychologists, they would share that oftentimes when you can't change how you feel or how you think as easily, simply changing your physical routines, right? Like I said, drinking water, going for a stroll, that makes breaks the loop of the negative cycle if you're in one and makes it a bit more on the positive. It's not as simple as that naturally, but it's one of the key things that is a very core part of mental health as well.
But having simple tools is a good thing. If it's simple, it works. Geeta, do you have any tools and tricks up your sleeve?
So Theodore is absolutely right. Basically when I was doing my training in psychology, so much of it boils down to understanding that the human brain, when we talk about mental health, we like to think about, oh, you're not strong enough, but actually that's part of your brain. That's your brain. It's your physical organ. So your mental health is your physical health because it's your brain. And when we think about brain health, which I'd much rather do than go on a medical model and in a disability model in which we try to villainize mental health conditions, then we can start seeing that a lot of the treatments for things, it doesn't always have to be very complicated, right? So for example, I have been on, a meditation habit for the last 10 years and a gratitude habit also for the last 10 years. And yeah, of course, it's not as fancy as going through several other types of treatments, which I've also done, but it is the one that has stuck the most. And sometimes when we think about solving or finding other alternatives to addressing mental health issues, we also need to really talk about what are the everyday daily habits that you can do, the 1% difference that you can do to help your brain health.
So that's an unexpected, I think, to many people, idea that it's actually just health and you can do simple things to help. And that goes a long, long way. And you don't even have to get to that point where, you think that it's actually a clinical issue because, to Kylie's point, it's the environment causes a lot of that stress. I want to maybe ask any one of the panelists, like, there's something come to mind of a time when a red flag appeared, like when you really, really saw an entrepreneur so stressed out that you really just need to intervene. I'll give you an example. So just a month ago, because of all the different things that have happened in the market, and now with, somebody starting up a war in Eastern Europe, I have a lot of stressed founders, and all of them are going through, fundraisers. And I was just talking to one founder, and he told me one thing. He said, oh yeah, I haven't been sleeping very well, and I just took a sedative. And I know this guy is as calm as they get, but he also bottles things up. He's a fantastic leader. But, when I heard that, it was, obviously it was a red flag to me, because what I felt he was doing is he was putting in all the pressures of the company's success on his shoulders. And so I did two things, which is I said, let's reschedule, and I actually physically met up with him. And then I just talked him through this idea that, whatever happens to the company, please don't think it's just your fault. And, you also have a great team around you, and he's a phenomenal leader, and just let the team take the pressure off. And I think, in about 3 or 4 days later, he felt better. And I don't know whether he appreciated what I said, but I feel like sometimes it's our responsibility to reach out. That's my sort of red flag story where I really felt concerned. And anyone, please tell me like a recent story about this. No, Geeta, go ahead. Yeah.
Okay, to be really honest, this is where it gets really hard, because mental health doesn't have a look. Everyone thinks they can tell who's depressed and who's anxious and who's suicidal. That is not true. It does not have a look. You don't even know what someone's going through. They could be the calmest person you meet. They could be the kindest. They could do all the charity work, and still deep down they're crumbling. And that is super duper hard. So I think when it comes to that, there needs to be a much larger conversation in the ecosystem about the entire environment itself, because, for example, there are so many perceived wisdoms in our ecosystem that just prioritizes, fast success above all else, right? Like, yeah, do everything now and then just apologize later. It really just puts a premium on basically bulldozing towards anything and everything just to achieve that growth, just to achieve that traction, just to achieve that metrics. And we also glorify like certain standards of success way above anything else, that in the end, it does create this kind of social pressure, and more than that, actual financial pressure from investors for founders to just, oh yeah, forget myself, I'm just gonna go, because another thing about mental health that doesn't really get talked about is the average person, I went to school for psychology, so it's a little different. And I've also been in therapy since like 7 years old because of autism. But the average person probably never got mental health education where they can kind of see that, hey, I think something's off right now. They probably continue going through life just going, I don't know, I just don't really sleep a lot, but there's this saying that you only sleep when you're dead in startup culture. So I'm just going to keep doing that, and yeah, it's just this much larger conversation where we really
it's sort of like the community makes excuses.
We do, and we glorify it. We put a premium on people who are tired. Like
can I I love that. Can I build on this in a way that's larger to contextualize this? Because it's not just about startups. This is a movie we've watched before. Every new industry that grows very quickly, back then with law, and then finance, Wall Street, and then with just larger corporate FMCG, and then every single society, every single economy, when China's like fast, super evolving, and now with the 996kind of like culture that people are just paying attention to, like anything that grows big and fast and is very capitalistic does create environment. But the cure, right? The cure to all of this is recognizing that, hey, since the 1940s, there's like a decline of like collectivism, communal, with Ayn Rand, with individualism. You celebrate and glorifying the individual goals, and the whole industry is called self-help. It's like, I'm just gonna help myself. Do you know what I mean? And so it's like personal growth. It's just like me, right? So you got this like egocentric, me-driven world. Right. And then so we'll look at the data on urbanization, right? Investors will always look at mega trends. Any fast growing economy is rapidly urbanizing. After you go past 50%, it gets to 75% urbanizing. What comes with urbanization? Number one, the bankruptcy of churches and other religious institutions, right? They actually go bankrupt every year, right? So places of worship and the traditional forms of worship, they obliterate, right? So you got highest level of atheism correlated with urbanization. What else, right? So where are people finding new religion? Where are people finding ways to connect with one another? Now we bring it back to entrepreneurship or any kind of like corporate idea that it's about me and my success. Then you realize that I'm so special. I can't even talk to my own wife about my problems because she's not going to understand. I'm not talking to my neighbor. I'm not going to talk to my mom and dad. They're not entrepreneurs. They won't understand my problems, right? So you get into this very me idea. You just cocoon yourself into this me-centric thing. So the solution, look, here's the interesting thing, right? And Geeta, I think you would appreciate this, right? The easiest attack vector is something that ties into their ego. It's usually weight loss. It's usually like eye bags. It's usually like some kind of vanity metric, like physical vanity metric. There's a lot of like, if it starts hurting my startup, right? I've got one of my founding teams, right? They successfully navigated exit, but 2 weeks before they had the exit, like one of the founders had a stroke in the meeting room, and he's in his 30s. Okay,
No.
so it's physical. It's like it's something that hurts what they care about.
Okay.
Be it their looks, right? Be it their startup, right? And then, hey, I gotta turn my life around, right? It's like I gotta do something. I'm gonna go for spin class. Suddenly, I'm going to a running club. I'm meeting all of these friends, and suddenly I've got these new friends, right? So, anyways, I'm gonna stop my rant over here, but Kiana, you're giving me the nod over here, but you see where I'm going with this, right?
The moderator's coming in. No, okay, like, okay, first of all, Kylie, it took me about 15 minutes to wake you up, but it's absolutely.
I'm totally going to agree on Kylie. With Kylie on his aspect of we're losing community, and that is massive. And that's also a thing that happens in psychology, where we really question the environment, the ecosystem, the community that the individual is in, because everyone thinks they can quote unquote self-help and do everything themselves. It is physically untrue because of your brain. Your brain has this thing called mirror neurons. It connects with people very literally.
Okay.
Yeah.
Explain to me what a mirror neuron is. That's worth going.
Sure. So mirror neurons are actual neurons in our brain. This was based out of an experiment where they did it with monkeys, and they realized that this part of our brain physically reacts when we see someone does something in front of us, or when we see someone in front of us. Basically, it reacts because of other people. And what it really means is that we are not individual automatons that walk around having no effect by other people. No, we affect other people. We are affected by other
positive neurochemistry if you have a good experience. Of course, you have a negative.
If I see Theodoric happy, I'm more likely to feel happy. If Theodoric is grimacing in agony, I'm more likely to feel Theodoric's pain.
Because we're social
mirror neurons.
That's a mirror
neuron.
I
feel like, okay, go ahead. Geeta.
Oh no, so something like that, basically. Basically,
the community is very important. Yeah.
Well, you don't live in a vacuum. No human beings live in a vacuum. That is not how you're built. In fact, we are social animals. All of us are just creatures that need each other. And this is not talked about more. We always make it sound like, oh, what thing can I do only by myself that can help me? We don't think about, well, actually, what can we do for each other so we can help each other and we can grow together? Like, together is rarely a thing that we talk about in self-help.
Theodoric looks like he's got a lot of data behind this. Whenever we invite,
we're gonna have to give Theodoric 5 minutes to answer. Because you have the unenviable task of balancing, individual help that people may be very shy about, but also encouraging people to address this in the wider community layer.
Yeah. So I'll just bring it back, and there's a couple of parts here, and I'll try to kind of go over this in a way that I think makes sense. So one of the key things that brings back to Kian's question earlier, red flags that I've seen, or each of us have seen towards what other founders have struggled with. To the part of founders itself, definitely less of that in terms of more of a peer-to-peer versus like an investor to portfolio piece there. But linking back to Kylie and Geeta's point as well, it's much, much larger than just founders itself, right? A lot of times when I go into my own circles, I have like a group of founder peers that I meet up every month or so, or even social peers itself. The issues that come up are not red flags, but a lot of times more early in the spectrum of where they struggle with, right? So when we explain mental well-being, mental health, depending on whatever the semantics is to the audience that relates to them, there's 3 buckets to it, right? It's not just you are unwell, and it's not news to you guys, unwell or well. There are people that are thriving, people that are managing with stress, and people who are clinically unwell. And even for those that fall in those buckets, what we often remind them is that it's not black and white, right? You've moved across this spectrum depending on the stages of where it is. So I think for what we try to push towards the general population, or even towards the senior execs that makes these decisions to invest in this, is to make them aware that mental health is not black and white. Folks would move along to where they're struggling facing with. And so that's kind of how we try to make it much more relatable than just mental health and illnesses, basically.
Do you have an ability for a company to do a community-led thing through your app?
So one of the things that we do, so we do three things today, right? So we have self-guided tools. That's where we got started. We actually, the core, what we do today is to connect individuals with actual professionals, one-on-one, coaches, therapists, psychologists, and even psychiatry as well. One of the new things we do today is group sessions, right? So more towards a one guided person, towards a group of people. For us, when we looked at mental health support, the first stage of what we're trying to reach was scale, right? How we get this to the masses. The second thing is emergent towards the level of care we can provide them. So now we've gone to the scale, digital access towards mental health tools. How do we make it much more immersive? So that means live support or other forms of group peer-to-peer elements that makes it a lot more immersive as well. A lot of times, the final small point here is that in mental health and well-being, oftentimes we don't simply only need advice or feedback. We just want to be heard and let it out to someone. And oftentimes, hence why a lot of therapists simply listen with the right questions and you self-discover what you want to work on as well. So I think having that listening here it's a key part to this.
I want to switch the tone to talk about practical tools, just in case anybody who's watching this can start Googling. And I'm going to throw some big things, words out, which I'm not as good, and I got some experts here. Cognitive behavioral therapy. Somebody explain that to me, and how do you do it? Where do you find that? First of all, what is cognitive behavioral therapy? Gita, please tell me.
Well, actually, Theodoric should talk about this. CBT,
okay.
Yeah, because it's a type of therapy, but I think Theodoric can really expand on this.
Sure. So just to kind of give it a context, I myself, my journey, I'm not a clinician or clinically trained, right? I have my own mental health journey, have been through therapy since young, but I do work with a lot of psychologists. We have our own in-house clinical team with our clinical director. So I have got a good sense of this topic, at least from an understanding point of view. So CBT, right, cognitive behavioral therapy, as Gita mentioned, it's a type of therapy and it's the most proven type of therapy that most therapists, psychologists actually practice. What it simply means is that there's a part of your, they tackle this in a structured way. There's a process in between, from identifying your thoughts, your triggers, your issues, firstly, how you react towards such triggers, and then how do we rewire your thoughts to actually change those behaviors up. So that's a very broad way of how that process is run. It can be self-administered from yourself to some extent. You can read self-guided tools, and it's not the recommended route, but some people with the right tools and knowledge can actually work on this themselves if they don't have access to professionals. But of course, ideally, it's working with actual licensed mental health professionals, right, who can actually give a safe environment, get you through the process and work through it. So it's basically a type of therapy that's the most researched, the most validated, and has a process there. Yeah.
Excellent. So is there an app? Does your app do cognitive behavioral therapy? I went to your app and I started seeing, a sort of a workflow about it. You look stressed. First of all, are you stressed? Write down something. Is that, can it be done on the electronic form?
Yep. So actually, our app it's heavily based on CBT as the core foundational mental health literature we pull from as well, right? And there are many different types of modalities in mental health. There is CBT, that's cognitive behavioral therapy. There's ACT. There's mindfulness. There's breathing. There's so many types.
ACT. What's ACT?
It's acceptance. Something. It's linked in mind. I don't know, Gita, if you know this piece. You
Sorry, you are on mute.
Gita, you're still on mute.
Yeah. So I feel like, hey, you're on mute, or can you hear me, are the ultimate Zoom conversations. So I think ACT is acceptance and commitment therapy, but it's not as widely practiced as CBT, I think. Of course, I don't know what it's like in different regions of the world, but basically so much of when we think about therapy is really just about uncovering why we do what we do, and if there's anything we can change in order to literally just feel better. And I think that's really like the practice of psychology. Can we make your day-to-day life more effective and better? And when we think about solutions, just like when we think about brain health, people's brains are so diverse. We all come from different backgrounds. We come from different environments. We do different things, that there is no one size fits all solution to anything. So for example, if CBT worked great for me, and by the way, I did CBT for 5 years, does not mean that CBT might work for you. I mean, it could be EMDR, it could be ACT, it could even be nothing, right? It could be just you're going for a walk every morning. It could be you're taking medication. It could be you're going for spiritual retreats. I have no idea. So when we think about mental wellness, we should think about it in a spectrum, as Theodoric said, and not this kind of like, I am totally 100% healthy all the time, to like, I am totally losing my crap. You know, it should just be this entire spectrum where you can go up and down all around throughout your entire journey, because you could also be ultra successful and feel like crap. Like that is completely possible. In fact, I went through depression after I experienced success. Like that is also possible. So when we think about all these solutions, just be very open-minded to all the different realms of possibilities that you can do, not villainize any type of solution, not go like, oh, you take medication, oh, you're a loser, right? You should have like learned to figure it out on your own. No, just everything needs different solutions for different times and places. But number one thing is you need to start talking about it. You physically have to say something. You have to say something as simple as, I don't know why, I just haven't been like excited about work lately, but I used to love it.
The first thing we do is we remove the stigma. And I want to throw this perspective to Kylie as well, because Kylie, I've seen you transform from, you know, just a normal human being to a really somebody very, very, but first of all, actually, you're not a normal human being. That's the whole point why you're Kylie. As in a normal physical human being to now so intense and so passionate about fitness. You know, I watch you on social media doing your exercises. You're an inspiration to so many people. Maybe you want to talk about how, you know, personally you found that physical exercise has just transformed, or maybe not.
I'll take okay, I'll take that and build it into your requests for practical tools, right? So the first one I think I've mentioned earlier in this conversation as well is to like recognize the physical dimension. So this also expresses itself in the startups we invest in, because of course there's Calm or Headspace. Those are big unicorns that were not our portfolio, but there are a few more unicorns which work with corporations, and then they do a combination of having like health checkups. They work with insurers. So we invested in a Southeast Asian version of such called Naluri. And it's amazing. Like they go in because they want to, I mean, the companies want their employees to lower their cholesterol, so that, again, the capitalist idea is that let's lower our insurance costs, right? Then let's make sure they have less sick days, right? You know, but they found, working with very large organizations, some of them, they end up detecting early signs of suicide as well. And this is non-startups. This is like government-linked companies. These are like big organizations, right? So I think the physical dimension, again, they celebrate weight loss, they celebrate lowering of cholesterol, but then they start realizing it's an invitation, it's an attack vector for mental wellness and at the larger whole. So for me, your request to talk about me personally, I think after I built and sold my first 2 companies in my 20s, I was at the worst shape of my life, and I also felt pretty miserable. So I made a commitment to just take back some of the mental addictions I had. And some of it included silly things like shopping, right? And or even like trying to get receiving like compliments from people about how smart I am. You know, just little stupid things, right? And then so I was like, okay, I wrote down all these kind of dumb things that guide me. But of course, to take back my health, right? So I've been plant-based, vegan for 5 years now. I've been exercising consistently for the 5 times. Over the last year, I meditated every night for 10 minutes, and then I tracked the data on the Aura Ring. And then I found that when I switch off my meditation for 3 weeks, my resting heart rate is like 10 to 12 beats higher than when I actually meditate before. But yeah, so it's like from the 60s, like late 50s to 60s of the lowest resting heart rate when I sleep, versus like in the 40s to 50s. So I got all the data and I prove it to myself that, hey, meditation does have a biological effect. So I think the first invitation is that anyone who's experiencing any kind of forms of like kind of uneasy emotion, take a walk in a park, move your body, get in a state. Right? Change your physiology and see what options are available to you. And again, I don't want to diminish so much the full spectrum of what anyone can be experiencing. But again, it's just an invitation for like an easy way to get moving, get started in the journey. Now, the second thing is also the quick one. I'll end with one last thing and I'm done. The second one is about what we talked about, community, right? So this, again, using a personal example, like through the pandemic, I was like, oh, I'm such an extroverted and social person. I want to like hang out with people. I want to be creative, expressive. Hey, I'm going to do something I've always wanted to do, freestyle rap, right? So remember here, and we're talking about you can find a shaman everywhere. I found a shaman of freestyle rap.
You found a shaman.
I found a shaman of freestyle rap. Like he gave me I had weekly sessions with him, and he organized like other freestyle rappers. We had Singaporeans, Malaysians, and from all walks of life. We jump on Zoom every Sunday. Someone plays the beats, and and it's like freestyle therapy. You just talk about whatever you want to talk about, and some of it happens to rhyme, right? It's just such a human experience. I've been on it for over a year, so I think that's me building my own community that I feel I can connect to, and it's outside of my work world, which is even better, right? Now, the last thing I'll say is don't hate the game. It's like startups, right? Don't vilify, startups is so hard. I think Geeta talked about the glorification thing. Check this out, data standpoint, right? Does more entrepreneur success means diminished relationships and health? True or false? Some people believe that. Some people believe the more success they get, the worse off their lives will be. Some people believe that. But when I look at the data, out of the 5 unicorns from on our 2014 vintage, we invested in 21 companies. We have 5 unicorns. Out of all of them, only one company where I saw the founders actually have diminished health and mental state. The rest of them, Prenetics, Grab, Carsome, the founders became fitter. They became more calm. They became more steady. They have like wonderful families, right? So I would say that, hey, the startup game can invite the most personal growth or the most growth you ever see, the biggest expansion of your heart and mind ever, right? Invite that into your life. Don't blame startups and the startup career for any of your misery. Take back that control. This can be the best thing that can ever happen to you. So that's 3 quick tips.
There we go. Now I think everyone's listening. So since everybody's listening, I'm going to take 2 minutes and talk about, first of all, a shout out about the project that I've been doing, right? Which is the Unreasonable Podcast, which doesn't have enough viewers. That's why I'm talking about it.
It's good.
PEVC Summit, shout out, thank you. No, but we did that, right? So to give a perspective of those people who don't know what the Unreasonable Podcast is that there are really so many great podcasts out there that talk about, interview founders and so on and so forth. But I wanted to get a human side, a humanity to the madness of startups. And a lot has been said about from the founder perspective, but no one really gives any empathy to the venture capitalists, really, because they're evil human beings, right? So I got 3 venture capitalists, which I've always had. And now I realized that's more actually my support community, Michael Blakey over at Cocoon and your partner Vishal over at 500 Global. And we used to just meet a quarter and have usually over a steak dinner, lots of conversations which won't be repeated. It was so therapeutic. And when I was thinking about starting up a podcast, I said, wouldn't it be nice if we could share to the best that we can through our, once our PR teams have vetted it, a real raw experience of what it means to be a venture capitalist. And that's the Unreasonable Podcast. Because we believe, or all of us believe, that to be successful in life, you have to be unreasonable. You have to expect the best of yourself and expect the best of the world, be the most optimistic human being. And now I realize that actually that's my form of probably mental health, right? Apart from going to the gym and being fit and trying to control that, it's the community. And I think I've only just sort of thought of this by talking to all you folks here. So thank you very much. That's amazing. That's amazing. So let's try and wrap it up. So, Geeta, you want to say something? Go ahead.
Yeah, I want to expand on your point of the human side of things. And it's really great that you started that podcast. And I also want to expand on Kylie's point too, when we think of the community about not hating the game, just realize also when we think of the game, we think of the ecosystem, it's made of people. It's physically made of people. Therefore, the game is not this independent thing that we can never influence. All of us have a part to play in creating this ecosystem. So I think when I think of tips to give to founders, all I'm going to say to all founders is your self-worth does not equal your company value. Please understand that. Your company valuation does not equal who you are as a human being.
I've been guilty of that, okay?
It's okay, everyone, me too, yeah, right? So please be able to separate those things. And also when I think of, investors, I'm an angel investor myself for the last several years. Please understand that your companies are your partners. They're not, you're not the boss, you're not anything. They're your partners. So do what you would do with any other partner, which is communicate and really try to get to know who they are as human beings, right? Because when people do something so hard for so long and put their entire life in it, sometimes they will start to equate their value with what they're doing. And I think like if we can have this larger conversation and just keep the communication open and just break the stigma that mental health has a look, mental health is binary, mental health is one thing, then I think we can be more productive.
So let me try. Oh, Theodoric, any last thoughts before I try and summarize all the wonderful tips that I've learned today?
I think just kind of putting together all of what everyone has shared as well. Mental health, mental well-being, mental wellness, it's something that relates to everyone. I think the key thing is to understand that it's not just a black and white clinical struggle or not. We all have our struggles, and at different points in time, we face some situational bouts of depression or anxiety, and that's the first thing, right? And it's definitely okay to get support earlier on, I think, and whatever form that may be, like going for a run, going for exercising, or speaking to friends. Simple thing is that, right? It's a key thing. And if you have the privilege of having your own pod as you do here, and I think it's all via shared, right? Having people who can relate and just talk about it, it's a great starting point. Having a professional, it's great to take it to the next level. But I think just a simple thing as having your own community, it is a very big thing. So I think it's fantastic points that was shared today.
Yeah, I actually look forward to the recordings of the Unreasonable Podcast, and I'm going to see Vishal tonight, and we share a dinner, and then we work together as a joint project to try and really distill something. It's very satisfying. So we're wrapping up. I'm going to try to summarize all these great points. This, by the way, was not the flow we agreed when we first talked about it. That's the best thing I think has ever happened. But number one, it's brain health. It's not mental health. It's brain health. And what it means is it's a physiological neurochemistry. It's a physical thing. So therefore, number two, the first step is actually simple steps that you can do. Recognizing that you can change your physical routine is probably the best low-hanging fruit, the quickest. Hydrate, go for a walk, look at some trees, stop. Cameron was saying, right, when he was in my podcast, he went paddleboarding every day when he was selling his company. That's the low-hanging fruit. Then once that you have and you feel better, think of longer-term strategies. Realize it can be a community thing. Seek out friends, schedule regular checkups, start a podcast, get a hobby like freestyle rapping. Seems to work for one person on this. But I think hobbies are very critical. Number three, realize it's not just all your pressure. And that not just goes for founders, but for anybody in the community. If you're the VP of sales, or if you're the GM of a large FMCG group, the pressure is equally, it's not just you, you've got a lot of people around you. And then longer term, if you really start to want to invest, then, because mental health is on the spectrum, think about actual structured ways of improving your baseline. I think is the way to think about it, right? Cognitive behavioral therapy, going for a therapist. No, I think we all start going to the gym, lifting a few weights, and then after that you get a personal trainer. Now I'm addicted to my personal trainer. Why don't we have a personal trainer for a very personal thing, which is our brain?
Yeah.
Did I get it all? Did it work?
You got it all. Except maybe like don't blame the game of startups as well.
Yes. And most importantly, that you signed up for this, and actually I've experienced the most personal growth by being an entrepreneur too. I'm going to write that
and
down.
also change the game, by the way.
Yeah.
Which
don't blame the game, change the game. Yeah, I like that. It rhymes. Freestyle rapping right there, Geeta.
So this is degenerated from a panel to just me taking down notes. But I hope the people who are attending the Indonesian Private Equity and VC Summit 2022 have learned as much as I have learned. And it's hard to capture all three of you experts in one 1 hour session. Thank you very much for your time. Thank you very much for doing this. Couldn't do it without you guys. Please enjoy the rest of the summit, everybody, and hope to see you guys around in the community. Stay safe, stay sane, and hydrate.
All right, see you guys.
Okay.
Yeah, great work, Ken. All right, see y'all soon. Bye.
Bye.